This is the story of the beginning of the end of Old Ireland, of the Queen who supported it, the gentry who enforced it, and the warrior who resisted it. This is the massacre of Mullaghmast.
In this place it is claimed that 400 Irish men, women and children were murdered by English forces. The background to the Mullaghmast Massacre of 1577 lies in the English Crown's efforts to expand English territories in the Midlands.
In an instant, the native Irish opposition in the Midlands had been totally annihilated. But more than this, it symbolised the beginning of the end of the old Gaelic culture in Ireland. At this time, the Gaelic Midlands were controlled by the powerful clans of the O'Moores and O'Connors, and had for much of this period threatened the Pale, which was the heartland of the English government and culture. The old Earls of Kildare had traditionally protected this region in support of the Tudor government in Ireland.
The House of Kildare was based on the Fitzgerald dynasty and originally of Anglo-Norman origin, being one of the original 12th century invading Norman knights, and were Ireland's largest landowners. They were famously described in the annals of the Four Masters as having become, quote, more Irish than the Irish themselves, due to their adoption of Gaelic culture. But despite their new Irish enthusiasm, they never returned the land they took from the original native Irish. In fact, here at Mullaghmast was the ancient seat of the O'Toole clan, who were by now banished to the Wicklow Mountains in the wake of the Norman invasion.
As a result, the Crown was spared from dealing directly with Gaelic Ireland. This arrangement collapsed in the 1530s due to a rebellion in the House of Kildare. This buffer zone, which had sheltered the Pale, disappeared, and the Tudors were now forced to deal directly with the Gaelic Irish.
The House of Tudor was an English dynasty that held the throne of England from 1485 to 1603. They descended from a Welsh family named Tudor. The Tudor monarchs ruled the Kingdom of England and the Lordship of Ireland for 118 years, with 5 monarchs: Henry VII, Henry VIII, Edward VI, Mary I and Elizabeth I. And of course, Henry VIII created the Church of England that would be at odds with Ireland's Catholic Church.
The Crown negotiated a series of arrangements known as surrender and regrant with the O'Moores and O'Connors. This involved surrendering the title of their lands to the Crown and having them regranted under English law. These conditions included having to live to English culture and law.
But this created problems among the Irish. For example, English law dictated that the eldest son would inherit all the land of his father, while the Irish traditionally followed the ancient Brehon laws, which were more structured and democratic. When it came to something like the issue of inheritance, the land could be split amongst the sons of a father.
In June 1557, the O'Moores and O'Connors were declared rebels and their lands forfeit. Authority was given to grant this land to English settlers. Irish law was abolished, and the native population was to be transplanted into the west along the River Shannon. However, the O'Moores and O'Connors would begin to resist and attack the English settlers. According to one historian, quote, the majority of the English grantees were in fact the very soldiers who had been serving in the area, and who had already acquired a reputation for brutality and greed among the native population. The Lord Deputy increasingly resorted to the use of martial law, which was very cost-effective because it allowed soldiers to collect the profits of their work, as the law legally entitled the captain to a third of the movable goods and possessions of the dead traitors.
According to one historian, this acted as, quote, an incentive to slaughter. The more suspected traitors the captains killed, the more traitors' goods and their followers received.
Terror was to be used against the Irish as outlined when the Irish were to visit the colonel of an English camp. Quote, the heads of all those which were killed in the day should be cut from their bodies and should be laid on the ground by each side of the way, so that none could come into his tent, but must pass through a lane of heads. Yet it did bring great terror to the people when they saw the heads of their dead fathers, brothers, children, kinsfolk and friends lie on the ground before their faces, as they came to speak with the said colonel. One significant leader of the O'Moore clan was Rory Og, who emerged as the most formidable leader of the resistance. He was in 1571 elected chief of his sept. Because of the power of this title, he was able to attract large numbers of disaffected Moors and O'Connors. Rory Og soon became a nightmare to the settlers and government alike. As justification for this campaign of Gaelic terror, O'Moore cited the vicious nature of the plantation environment, where natives were cut down at will and with impunity. Rory dismissed English civility and justice on the evidence of settler brutality and the arbitrary execution of his relatives.
This included the murder of Rory's wife and 2 children when they were burned alive in a cabin.
In 1565, Sir Henry Sidney was appointed Lord Deputy of Ireland. He was instrumental in the Elizabethan conquest of Ireland, serving as Lord Deputy 3 times. His career was controversial both at home and in Ireland. As one historian remarked, quote, "In the course of the Crown campaigns, the killing of the lowborn became widespread. It was even considered unremarkable." Returning from one of his outings, Lord Deputy Sidney joked in a letter to Whitehall that he had killed so many Irish varlets he had lost count. Effective guerrilla tactics made Rory impossible to capture, and embarrassed by the ultimate failure of the colony, Sir Henry began to contemplate more drastic action. Indeed, a massacre of hundreds of the MacDonald clan on Rathlin Island in 1575 had been praised by Elizabeth I. According to traditional accounts, Francis Cosby and Robert Hartpole, prospective English colonists in the plantation, organised the ambush at Mullaghmast. The circumstances of the massacre are described in the annals of the Four Masters as follows. A horrible and abominable act of treachery was committed by the English upon that part of the people of Offaly and Leix. It was effected thus. They were summoned to show themselves with greatest number they could be able to bring with them at the great rath of Mullaghmast. On their arrival at that place, they were surrounded on every side by 4 lines of soldiers and cavalry, who proceeded to shoot and slaughter without mercy, so that not a single individual escaped. However, one man called Henry O'Lawler was said to have escaped by hacking his way out with his sword.
3 months later, Rory avenged Mullaghmast when he burned the town of Naas in County Kildare.